D is asking, how can an imperfect being imagine a supremely perfect being, and how does that help improve a society in chaos? Interesting premise, D. Feel free to expound on that.
Hi, y'all. Nice to talk to you again. What was the philosopher? He wasn't. I keep wanting to say Pat.
Rene Descartes earlier.
Descartes, yeah.
We're all like so excited to tell you.
I know. We were so busy Googling things earlier, and now
Like, totally. Oh man, but it's completely circular reasoning. I'm thinking of a God, therefore God exists, but God can only exist because I'm thinking of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and really the whole premise falls apart because the being thinking about the God is imperfect. So how can imperfection imagine perfection?
well, there's a reason why Descartes isn't known as one of the great theologians of his time. Like this argument that is presented to us today has been criticized before. We're certainly not the first people to break it apart. And it's not one of his better, well-formulated thoughts or ideas. There's a reason why people think of Descartes as the think, therefore I am guy and not the existence of God guy. A lot of people, the scholars included, don't find this super convincing, right? For reasons we've already talked about. But Descartes was like, nah, this is the key. This is it right here. So I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. How can we even understand what a perfect being is? But that's kind of Descartes' point, though. To his credit, his thing is, well, we can't understand it, but we have an idea of it. So where does that come from? It has to come from outside ourselves because we're not perfect beings. That's kind of his whole shtick. There is,
I cannot define it.
Yeah,
I cannot define it, but I've got the vibes. So therefore, it is really ironic to me also that a lot of folks who will use this argument that atheists just want to be their own God will also essentially use arguments that just invent God because they thought of him. And I find that a little bit funny.
Yeah. Which is like, maybe we have some better, like maybe God just has to, like, I don't know, write me a letter at least, or just like talk to me. I don't know. Like, I just feel like that's going to be way more convincing than just, well, if I think about it real hard, I know that he's out there. So I don't know.
But my main point is that old philosophers are dead, and they can't help us. They can't help us right now. Okay, Descartes, Pascal, all of these guys, they can't help us right now. We're in a situation where, in a little over a month, we're going to see.
Well, let me think about this though, Dee. I mean, you say maybe it's not helpful to us as American broad society, but like, how many of us has started our journey questioning things and figuring things out because they read Plato's allegory of the cave, right? Like, how many people have discovered an entire worldview that first started because somebody, a philosopher, asked them a question that people just hadn't considered before? I mean, yeah, is it, are the individual philosopher, I'm trying to think of like, is explorations of meteorological nihilism going to help fishermen in Taiwan? No, like, it's not obviously useful for everything in our lives, but it is useful for at least considering things that maybe we hadn't considered before. And I do think there's value to that. No, I don't think Descartes' going to solve all of our issues or Blaise Pascal or anybody, but they are still valuable to us. And I think there is a reason why we should continue to look at these guys, because they do say something about the human spirit, if anything, which is that if we think about stuff enough, maybe we can figure out the world. That's kind of a radical premise in and of itself. In Christianity, we're taught that the world is set, that there is a God and there is a devil and they're going to fight it out. And it doesn't matter because it's all there for us. Whereas philosophy in general kind of says, and works under this idea that, well, maybe we have to be the authors of our own destiny and figure things out and think things through and find our own solutions to problems that may or may not come from a God. So I don't know. Maybe I push back on that. I think that there is some value to it, but that's just my take. I don't know what you guys think.
I think that I very much sympathize with the idea of just being like, who cares what these guys thought? You know, because I think so often folks are turned off by philosophy, particularly in online discourse, because it's brought up like, well, this old ancient person said this, therefore women belong in the home, or like some bizarre kind of justification. And I think that sure has more to do with the individual who's making these arguments than it does the actual ideas and arguments. But I think I do understand the temptation to sometimes just be like, okay, but like, why should I do that? Because some guy 2,000 years ago said it, I think sometimes people replace Jesus figures and religious figures with philosophers, with looking for another source of authority, and they decide that that's going to be like these old smart men, which is cool and interesting to study. I definitely, though, sympathize with the point that you just made about, you know, kind of what it says about the human spirit and the experience of being human. The name I've selected, Sofia Spina. Spina is for Spinoza, you know, the guy who was excommunicated from the Jewish community in Amsterdam in the 1600s because he started to advocate for secular government. His arguments are still incredibly relevant today. I clearly find him inspiring, and I think that matters. I think we can also actually very practically argue that I'm sort of working in the mental health field, and a lot of mental health theories are really based on old philosophers. Existentialism is a counseling theory that has to do with how you create, how you find meaning. And then, you know, constructivism is also used in counseling, and like how you actually create that and how it's built through society. So there are very practical applications, and I very much gain a lot from this, but also I am sympathetic to being like, fuck those guys, you know, on occasion.
You could say both. I feel like fuck these guys, but also they are kind of valuable sometimes. I'm okay with that.
Take what's good, leave the rest, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a contradiction. I just think it's sort of like these things can coexist, and definitely do.
Hell yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But I was actually really interested in Jimmy's comment that, you know, he's interested in the power structures that religion has created, and through those power structures, I think maybe by extension, I could suppose possibly that, Jimmy, you could have gone on to say, you know, that these power structures are reaching into places where they don't belong, you know, like a secular government. And
well, these ancient power structures. Yeah, so these ancient power structures over a period of centuries have increasingly been challenged by other power structures that have popped up, like secular governments. In our own time, we're seeing corporations. We are seeing transnational organizations, and we are seeing international organizations or non-governmental organizations that are popping up, and they're creating their own power, and they're rendering the church more and more inefficient or necessary, right? So yeah, that plays into why the church has to change so much. We've talked about it. I think Dan brought it up a little bit earlier, you know, in the case of Brazil being a unique kind of mixing of cultures and just having to change along with those cultures, because otherwise they lose their influence. You know, there was a time where religion was the sole form of government, the sole power structure that ordered society, kept things going, and that has dissipated and kind of all but disintegrated with the rise of other power structures. And, you know, they still try and gain their influence. We're seeing that in the United States now. We're seeing more right-wing Christian organizations reach into the government, offer their financial support in return for an upholding of their traditions and values. And unfortunately, we're seeing a large swath of elected officials giving into that power structure and helping to revive it when it was actually in decline. So, yeah, I mean, that's my take on it. I think when it comes to, let's say, Catholicism, they've been fracturing for a really long time, and they still continue to fracture. And they're not as effective as a power structure as they used to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
but if you want to explore power structures, philosophy is also a good way to do that too. Just saying.
Yeah.
That's like the entirety of postmodern literature in the 20th century. Like a lot of it is about power structures.
You know, so. And D, on your first comment, you know, I kind of sat back, you know, because there's 3 hosts today. You know, there's a lot of talking, right? We could
it's mostly
probably,
me. Sorry about that.
No,
it's
you know.
I'm doing plenty.
Dan, it's you when there's 2 hosts. So
yeah, right. He's so right.
Let's just call it what it is. No, but seriously, D, you know, what good are the philosophies or the philosophers of the past? I mean, think of the people who stood up when nobody else stood up, right? Think of the work that they did. I think Sofia, you know, talked about this a little bit, but people that were burned at the stake, you know, or people that were threatened with those kind of things because they had the guts to challenge it. I, for one, you know, feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, you know, just because I feel like we're progressing in the right direction by challenging these power structures that tell us, hey, this is the way. And we could say, nope, you know, you're not the way.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. D, that's all the time that we got. Any last remarks you want to make before we let you go?
No, thank you for your views. It's definitely helping me take a longer view, and yeah, I think I'll spend some time doing some more reading, and thank you guys. It's been great talking to you.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, D. Thank you for your call.